Okay, let's go. I can never get my hair right in these videos. Whatever, hair is gonna hair. We have more important things to talk about than my hair. Like, this whole Neptune in Aries retrograde sitch, and basically all of July. Sure, I'm gonna throw my 2 cents in, but let me say that where I'm going with this chat about the astrology and some current events as they go down, the ideas that I'm weaving in, what I hope to do is to give you some ideas to be with, to think about, to invite you into my way of looking at the world, which isn't just me, mine, right? It's a networked vision for constructing your reality. And this is my way of telling you how I think differently, and therefore how I approach mental health. Ideas are great. What do you do with them? Well, in my case, I like to hold people in a way that is meaningful for them to come back to themselves, to help them come back to themselves, and to work on the moment in time and the story that they need to, so that they can grow, so that they can change the relationship that they have to whatever is going on inside. They means you. I feel like I've already said too much. So just like my hair, who cares? Let's just get into it. Look, Neptune in Aries, the Neptune Sun conjunction in Aries, and then Neptune is going retrograde. It's the first time in 165 years that Neptune is going retrograde in Aries. And that's like, ouch. That is the inkling of being, coming into one's vision and reality as we might like to perceive it. And then coming back, stepping back and saying, where is the truth that I need to be with here? Because the truth that I need to be with is what is actually going to incarnate and to grow and to have its own life cycle. It's like baby timeline being born. But hold that thought. There are a couple of other important psychoenergetic events, celestial events in the solar system, like the sun is also conjunct the Pleiades cluster. That actually happened on July 6th. 7-7 portal gets a lot of hype as this like energetic portal, but the actual physical component to it happened on the 6th. Regardless, we're feeling a lot of energy. We had the Mars-Uranus conjunction on the 4th, and there is a Mercury retrograde in Gemini happening. The messenger has gone back underground to reconfigure and like tinker under the hood, right? I hesitate to use so many of these commonplace metaphors, Mercury retrograde, the messenger underground, right? But that's what's coming through, partly because what is emerging is going to have its own words and its own forms. Look, there's a whole lot of stuff happening. There's a whole lot of energy in our fields right now, and it's voltage. Voltage is just that current that an electric charge will carry. It's not bad, it's not good, it's just charge. You have to direct where it's going so it doesn't become destructive. Bet you walk down the street and you see power poles that say high voltage. Well, yeah, that's a warning, because that high voltage is contained. It's got somewhere to go. It's got the structure that it needs so that it's not harmful. One thing that I have been being with lately is just how much the astrology that is happening now, Mars conjunct Uranus, there is a lot of historical precedent for it and war. Going back to World War II, there's some astrological events, and there are plenty of other astrologers who really focus in on this point, on this talking point. But I would suggest to go back a little bit further. I say let's go back to World War I, to the 1910s. And the reason I say that is because I'm thinking of what was being emergent, what was being recorded. Two things pop up for me: Carl Jung and Dadaism. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychologist who explored and expounded upon what we name as the subconscious. I'm not a fan of calling him and Freud as the fathers of psychology, because they were not. They were Western earmarkers, but they had a lot to say in what we now call psychology, especially practiced from the Western training or standpoint. But Carl Jung had some really interesting observations and visualizations that he shared through his writing, through published works such as the Red Book. He spoke and wrote about synchronicities, events that meaningful events that happen to emerge out of the subconscious. They're acausal, so there's no reason. Coincidences that are kind of magical, right? He also spoke about the lack of causality of synchronicities. Checking my notes. And he made this really interesting point that causality is bound to space-time, and if space-time is collapsed, then there are no reasons behind the things that happen, no causality. And I think that's really interesting, because he did work quite a bit with another German physicist named Max Planck. At the same time, in the world stage, the work of Einstein, relativity, was emerging. The Big Bang Theory was emerging. So something about the nature of how we use old metaphors, or how we use language to describe space-time, was also changing. Fast forward now to July 2026, all the hype is in disclosure, alien encounters, AI, non-human intelligence. And there is a sort of play with time. We're connected all the time across the globe, across space, to each other through the internet. So we have a very, very strange experience of space-time on a real lived level. We don't even need to get mystical about it. We can, but there's something very interesting going on here with information, the blurred boundaries of physical space and time perception. These are Uranus and Gemini themes, the transit that we're currently experiencing, questioning our construction of information. But another piece that really interests me, another historical piece, is Dadaism. Dadaism was a short-lived art movement that emerged around World War I. Artists like Max Ernst, again, came from a German-speaking region, from Switzerland, but there were nodes of this type of art. Players in New York, also in Berlin, Zurich, Berlin, New York. Dadaism was anti-form, anti-art, anti-aesthetic. Essentially, you could also sort of argue as anti-body. They viewed the body as a machine, and the absurdity, the essence of the time, the absurdity was expressed through Dadaism, through art. Artists always having the loudest megaphone to the truth or the insanity of all things. They were vocal about the ridiculous war. It had no point. Life was also brimming on the chaotic. Life had no point. So Dadaism emerged. Carl Jung was doing his work with synchronicity and the inner spaces of the mind, the interaction of the inner world and the outer world, the blurring boundaries between both, the alchemy of what happens when mind and matter sort of interact, the transcendence, the healing. He was, again, in psychology, and I think that his ultimate goal was to seek healing, was to develop also ideas of a personal myth, aka his teachings on individuation, how the individual has to define itself separate from the collective experience so that individual can then heal what is ultimately essentially theirs and transcend beyond what he or she or they have been raised or acculturated to. There's something there in Jung's teachings about the psychoid archetype, that mind and matter are one and the same, different aspects of the same thing. That is something that we work with and reflect upon in science and parapsychology. Consciousness is essentially one and the same thing. The observer is that which is being observed. So all of this far out, wild idea dump coming at you like this. we are moving into new consciousness. We are moving into new places of inner world, new abilities to transverse and experience the outer world. From a lived experience perspective, I think that very often meaningful experiences that involve interactions or atypical interactions of mind and matter and perception get labeled as disease, disorder. This isn't to condemn all of psychiatry, the DSM. There are neurotypes, there are bodies that are built to perceive information in a different way. This is really about how we value experiences that are atypical. And I think that the world is splitting into two types of consciousness. People who can hold larger amounts of awareness and people who don't. So I think we also have made in our mainstream cultures, we've made little niches to fit into. We have subcultures, whether it's, you're a person with autism and you identify more with people with autism, or you're aligned politically and that just becomes like your bread and butter and like birthday cake, whatever. Like you stay in that group. But I think the invitation that I'm giving to you is to be open to what you're perceiving and just be with it. Not name it, not label it, not immediately say, oh, it's because I am a person with bipolar disorder that I have heightened perception, or I'm a person who doesn't really care that, trillionaires exist in the world and billionaires are killing us all. I'll still order my Amazon shit and, use my Starlink. There's something about the quality of inner experience that's changing. And I think astrologers, if you speak astrology, pull up, because I think we're going to need to find or align, or if there is one out there, and let me know. I think that there is some way that we need to actively work with the psychoid archetype, that mind matter archetype, as it moves through the world, maybe as a signature of healing. I don't know. A signature of movement. I don't know. Within the psyche. And I think that in this period of Neptune retrograde from July 7th to December 12th, I think this is the new consciousness being born. This is our superhero era. What we imagined it to look like isn't what it looks like. It's actually much more mundane. The consciousness that we are birthing, that for us is like, whoa, it's here, it's arriving. For the next generation, and the next generation's like, yo, I don't even mess with Gen Z. Like, they are already like light years ahead of us, right? But I think for other people, the deeper perception, the more fluid ability to move in and out of the liminal world, liminal spaces in the world, move with more comfort with atypical experiences, different types of perception. That's going to be normal. That won't always be pathologized. But right now we have to really take a good hard look at what that actually means to live on a daily basis with differently abled perception activated. And I do think we need another planet, or at least another celestial or solar system body, to sit in for what I'm calling the rhizome archetype. Like, I know Venus traditionally rules Taurus, right? So something that's a higher octave of that relationship, because it's the network, the rhizome, mycelium, mushrooms, that talking, that non-human consciousness, that interconnection of matter through nerve endings, that physicality. You see where I'm going with this? I'm pulling up the old words, but we need the new ones, right? That archetype will also be activated, because what I think is part of this new consciousness, some people will be able to hold consciousness on a much more expanded level than others. You're going to start to see across timelines. And that will also be a more normal experience because of the activation. All of this high voltage energy coming through our physical body is also getting the upgrade, because we're networking in to this rhizome-like sheath of ethereal physical matter that feeds us more information. And it's not even the middle of the month yet. So be with that. Let me know what you think. Work with the energies if you feel called, by just sitting and watching for the synchronous occurrences. Cool. So maybe you have a dream tonight that's like, oh, that girl was saying in that video something about, okay. Maybe tomorrow you're walking down the street and you hear something about Carl Jung and his theories. Maybe you happen to go on the interwebs and suddenly Dadaism is in your feed. Well, that might be the algo. So like, that has like, some kind of algorithmic, backing. But be with what I say, see how it populates, how it constellates in your field, and then ask yourself, what do I do with this? Because what you do with it is what you're doing going forward in this reality that's got a whole lot more subconscious stuff, imaginative stuff, different types of stuff available for your perception.